Hello and welcome to week 3. Um, so I need to give you a little bit of background on some things. So this week we're going to hit up again this topic of what is ethics? What are ethics? What's the appropriate verb there? Anyhow, we're going to talk about ethics because we need to come up with a good definition so that we're working with the same baseline when we have these other conversations. The other thing we need to look at is what is philosophy? So ethics kind of comes under the big umbrella of philosophy. And we're going to look at arguing, not like yelling at each other, but how do you make like a reasonable, rational argument about things? Then we're going to look at a couple of projects. We're going to continue the crowdsourcing project, and we're going to go play with an AI by talking to it and asking it some questions. But first, let me make 2 points, see if I can remember both of them. One is that sometimes it takes me longer to put resources together because we're not using a textbook. I'm not pulling assignments from some database of assignments. I'm putting together and curating resources and activities for you that I hope are relevant and interesting and give you things to think about. And so it would be super easy just to pull out my notes from last time I taught this class, which I sort of did, like we're using some of the same stuff, but things change all the time, and new activities and new ideas and new technology to consider, that changes all the time. So sometimes it does take me a little bit longer to get things up and open, but I'll always try to throw something into Discord if I'm running late that says, hey, well, while you're waiting, why don't you go try this? So that's one of the things that I want to touch upon. The other thing is this really is a thinking class. And when I met with people in the 15-minute meet and greet sessions, I tried to make this point. This is not a class where you're going to just bubble in bubbles and sit in the back of the room and, play video games. I mean, you can play video games because we're going to have a whole unit on the ethics of gaming. But really, what you need to do is dive in early in the week, get engaged in the content, and think, because this is a thinking class, and that's the hardest part. You might have to go do a little extra research to give yourself some information that you need to come to informed decisions about things. And when we talk in Zoom, like we're going to do this week, you need to be able to support your opinion. And as I told people, there's not really bad ideas or bad opinions, there's just unsupported ones. So you need to be able to think through and say, well, I believe this because of this. And if you do that, first of all, it'll be good for you. That's a good skill to have, to be able to explain why you believe the things you do. But you might be able to make a persuasive case to your group or to your team or in Zoom to your breakout room that helps them understand where you're coming from and might even change their mind. Although that's not the goal. The goal isn't to change minds. The goal is to come to understandings. So having said that, let's take a really quick look at what we've got going on in Zoom. Sorry, not in Zoom, in Moodle. I'm going to jump over to our class and always start with the checklist. The checklist will give you things to check off. It'll show you how some things are connected. There's a little bit more information there sometimes for context. Sign up for the Zoom chat channel on Discord if you haven't done that already. Make your reservation. We've got a time on Tuesday and we've got a time on Friday. And for all the people, which was almost everybody, all the people that submitted their availability, I took that, threw it into the hopper. What's super interesting is I actually asked ChatGPT to help me with that, thinking, well, this is a thing a computer can do, but you know what? It couldn't do it. It came up with all sorts of weird stuff. And I've got a Google document that I'll probably share out in Zoom this week to show you how that conversation went with the AI. You would have thought. It did give me a suggestion, though, that helped solve part of the problem, but it couldn't solve the problem itself. So that was interesting. Anyhow, the point is, jump into Zoom because we're going to hit up a couple of things. We're gonna crowdsource this idea or brainstorm this idea about what is ethics. We're going to talk about this trolley dilemma, which if you've had philosophy already, you may have heard of, but it's kind of a benchmark thinking exercise about what you would do if you were the conductor and you had to send the trolley down one line or the other line, but there's groups of people on both lines. Anyhow, there's a couple of videos about that and an article that brings up some of the problems with that thought activity. And so we'll talk about that in Zoom this week. And then we're going to also, hopefully, if we have time, go actually play with ChatGPT and see what the fuss is all about. It's really cool for some things, but for other things, it really doesn't do a great job. So how do you know what to use it for? How do you use this tool? So under Think, we're going to have again, it's similar to the video last week, but it's an introduction to ethics with a bit of an article that dives in a little bit deeper about what ethics are. Again, inform your opinions. And this is one of the tools you can use to inform your opinions, is some of the resources that I curate for you on Moodle. And then again, here's the thing about the trolley dilemma. So if you can, at least glance through the trolley dilemma one before we come to class tonight or Friday night or this week. Anyhow, before you come to Zoom. So under the Learn section, this is not a philosophy class, like it's not Philosophy 101. You might have had that already. And if so, this will be review. But under the Crash Course Philosophy videos, I love Crash Course videos because they're like 10 minutes long. They are very dynamic. They give you a great overview. And so there's 3 of these videos. One is about philosophy and 2 are about argumentation. Like, how do you argue? But not like that. You're not going to throw anything, I don't think. And so altogether, they're about 30 minutes. So in under half an hour, or so, you're going to have probably a fairly good grounding in philosophical reasoning. And that will come in handy as we have our discussions throughout the semester. And then finally, down here in the do, this is the part that I'm going to dig into just a little bit. So we're going to take this crowdsourcing and ethics, and you might have noticed you're now on 2 team channels. You've got a home team channel, that's the one you were assigned last week, and you're a guest on another team channel. And what we're going to do this week is take all of the crowdsourcing posts that people on both channels, I wanted to give you a bigger body to choose from. That's why I combined the teams. All of those posts, look through them, make up a list of what the topics are, and then pick 3 that you think, oh, wow, this would be kind of interesting. And you can pick one of your own, but try to pick 2 from other people. And then see if you can find a resource that adds to what they already wrote about it, and then reply to them on their thread. If there's not already a thread, make a thread, and then other people can reply to that if that works out. But let's start the process of seeing what topics are the most interesting and the most popular in the class. And probably next week we'll pull that out, and then we'll start the process of, well, what are we actually going to put on the course schedule? So anyhow, this is part 2 of crowdsourcing. You don't have to do a ton of research for this. Just go read through other people's posts, see what you find is interesting, make a list, and then create a short list of like 3 topics and add to the conversation. Make a case for why you think that might be a good one to stick on the schedule. The second one, the ethics of generative AI. So when you go to this, it's going to open up, oops, I'm like in the middle of it here, right? It's going to open up a slideshow assignment. And there's a couple of activities on this assignment because you can't really make an informed decision about this ChatGPT if you haven't used it, and you haven't used it in a variety of ways. And so as you go through this, we're going to give you some things to consider. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there's some outcomes that will have you analyze, evaluate, and interact with the tools so that you can find out what it's all about. And then there's going to be 4 activities similar to what we've done before, 1, 2, 3, 4, and each of these will link off to that section. You can also always use, not all the slides are titled, but like the main slides are titled. And so that'll help you. This one's not as long as the Allison Sparkle one because, of course, I didn't copy in an entire book. But you're going to do 4 things here. So you're going to discover OpenAI. OpenAI is the organization that is sponsoring ChatGPT, or that did the research and has made it available. So who are they? and where are they from, and what's their goal, and why are they doing this, and who supports them. And there's all these questions you want to know, because that gives you a little bit of insight into the bias behind the technology. And that's always important to know. And if you've been in my 101 class, you probably have some good tools under your belt for how to find this out. But anyhow, I give you some things to look at here. And I believe this is the section where I've got some news articles. Let me see. I've got an in the news. Yeah. And so these are just 8 articles that I found. Honestly, I found like 50 that I've been cataloging for the last few months. But these are just a couple. They give some pros and cons. And I think I sorted out all the ones that required you create accounts or go behind a paywall. I don't think there's any of those here. But there might be, and if there are, just go to a different one if you don't want to do that. Just look at a couple of these, like read the headlines. These are the headlines. Read the one that looks, pick 2 or 3 that look interesting and see what you think. But let's go back to the previous slide. So then we're going to explore ChatGPT, and what you're going to do is come up with a couple of things that you want to ask it about. Have a conversation with it. I know that sounds weird, but say, hey, ChatGPT, what can you do? Or what's the weather like? That would actually be a dumb one. Don't ask it what the weather's like, because its database only goes up to like 2021. So so you might test it out. Like if you asked it a question about Russia and Ukraine right now, it wouldn't have current information about what's happened in the last year. But ask it some questions, and I give you kind of a challenge in there if you want to play with it and try that out. The third thing you're going to do now is like really test it out. Now that you've gotten used to it a little bit, how it works, there's this thing called prompt engineering, hashtag prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is, how do you phrase the question so that you get the answer you're looking for? So you may end up doing a little bit of prompt engineering. I've had to do a lot of that on things I've tried to pull out of this technology. But you're going to give it 3 different tasks. And it might be, don't tell your English teacher I said this, but it might be, pull up an old English paper and say, write me a table of contents for this document. And then you paste in the document, see what it does. Anyhow, I've tried a bunch of things, and I give you some examples of what I've tried, but I want you to come up with like 3 different tasks. If this is your genie in the bottle and you have 3 wishes, what do you wish it could do? And then go see if it can do it. And then finally, we're going to reflect and document, of course. So what you're going to do is I've got some questions for you to think about. And then I want you to document, I think the next slide here, actually, yeah. When you start, create a Google Doc and just keep track of all of this. Keep track of the questions, keep track of your observations, have something, share it with me. Honestly, I shouldn't have to say these every time other than the doc title. From here on out, this is always how it is. If you share a Google Doc, create a Google Doc, always include a header section, the name, the class, the date, the project. Doesn't, it's not complicated. And then have that at the top of your document. And then always share it with debbiek@gmail.com as an editor, that's me, and set general access to anyone can view. Anyone can be a viewer. Those 2 things, the header and the sharing, apply to every document from here on out, because, unless I say not to, because sometimes you'll be sharing it with your team, sometimes you'll be sharing it with other people, and you just want to have that stuff in place. So get in the habit right now of doing that header. Don't assume I know who it is. If I download the document and you haven't changed the file name and you don't have your ID on it, your header information, I don't know who it belongs to. So make sure I know who it belongs to. Anyhow, and the title on this one is, your name, ChatGPT. So just use that as a place and make it neat and easy to read, but use it as a place. It's not like it's a working document. So don't worry about, perfect punctuation and margins and all that. This is a working document for you to keep track of your notes. So have that open as you're going through some of this stuff, and maybe even include like screenshots of ChatGPT, or, if you ask it something, screenshot it and put it in as documentation. I do a lot of copy paste. So I'll like copy my prompt and then I'll paste it in the document, and then I'll copy what it replies and paste that in the document. And that helps me keep track of the conversation I've had with the AI. So anyhow, you're going to do that. And then I'm going to jump to the end, how to submit. Actually, let me go back here. Let me go to the think about it. So this is the reflective part. So here's the questions. There's 6 questions that I want you to reflect on after you've played with it. And these are big questions. All right. So there's not like an answer to these. This is a what do you think, but support it with what your experience is and what you might have read. Okay. Whoops, I somehow jumped a question. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So make sure maybe read those in the beginning, and that'll give you some schema for what to think about as you go through. And then how are you going to submit this? So we're going to do this in an interesting way. And as I said, this is a project in progress. ChatGPT didn't exist last year, so this is a brand new assignment. So we're going to try this. I'd like you to create a slideshow, preferably Google Slides, because it's easy to share. And you're going to include these sections: introduction, activities, reflection, conclusion. What I want you to do, I already have your document. That's going to have all of the detail, but what I want you to do on this one is kind of reflect on the experience as a whole, playing with this, and create something that other people could look at and get an idea of what you did, and what specific questions you asked, what the output was, and what you thought about all that. Okay. Now, don't cram all the words onto one slide or 4 slides. You have an infinite amount of space. Okay. Make it readable. This slide itself verges on the edge of too many words, but you do notice that I put in like line spacing between the bullet points to make it easier to read. But if all your slides are like this, then it's hard to read. There are different formats, for example, like this one, you could format it like this. There are some great templates available, slidescarnival.com, wonderful templates, all kinds of cool stuff. Anyhow, make it easy to read. But the key thing here is the develop. You're going to create a unique artifact, and we're going to talk about artifacts as we go through the class, that demonstrates what you have learned about using ChatGPT in an ethical manner in college education. And you can include that artifact in your slides as part of your slides or to link to it. But what the heck's an artifact? So I have a note down there. It's anything that demonstrates your understanding of using ChatGPT in an ethical manner in college education. Because I will tell you, this software, this piece of technology has blown up social media in education channels. LinkedIn, Twitter, pretty much everywhere there's educators. When it came out in November, people hyperventilated, freaked out. Oh my gosh, the sky is falling. It's the end of the essay. What are we going to do? One big group. And another group took a deep breath and said, here's all the cool things we can do. Why don't we try this? And now it's only been a little while. Professional development's coming in, how to apply ChatGPT to your class. Like, this is taking education by storm because they're worried that 1, students will cheat and not get the education they deserve, or 2, schools will block it, and this is the technology of the future, and students won't get the education they deserve if we don't teach them how to use it. Like, it's one of those polarizing, it's become a very polarizing technology. So and my thought is that the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Anyhow, so once you've reflected on all those other questions, see if you can create something. And there's a couple ideas here. You can create a video, a blog post, a podcast episode, social media post, whatever it is, you have to document it. But the idea is you're going to succinctly demonstrate what you've learned about this to somebody else, like it's for an audience. So the slides are for us in the class, but the artifact is for the audience. So that's what we're doing this week. Have a really good week, and I'll see you in Zoom.